All right, I'd like to welcome everybody to the call on covert hypnosis and NLP. It's going to be a nice, fun seminar today. Basically, I'm working on a covert NLP. In the class, Secret Mind Control, I spent several sessions. Ooh, what happened? Hold on. Did I get kicked out? Okay, it looks like I'm still on. I don't know what happened there. I apologize to that. Yep, looks like we're still on. Sorry about that. Still getting used to this I-7. All right, but in the Secret Mind Control course, I was spending an awful lot of time on basic waking hypnosis or covert hypnosis. I kind of would intersperse some of the covert NLP. So what I decided to do now is really focus on covert NLP. Okay, so to do covert NLP, there's some secrets that you really have to know, right? First of all, you have to really understand how to do split consciousness, right? Which is natural with NLP. I'm going to give a quick example, but it happens naturally with NLP. It's why NLP is covert hypnosis in action. People always forget that, but it's true, right? So what happens, if you understand split consciousness, it's just people don't think they're in trance, but to do what you're talking about, they have to go into trance, okay? So I'll give a quick example of that. I go into more detail in the other course. One must have rapport and understand advanced rapport if you're going to do covert NLP. And here's a big one, is one must deeply understand the NLP technique that they want to be using covertly, right? You just can't have a cursory. You actually have to understand the NLP technique at its basis, so what it's trying to do. So once you understand not just the steps, but the process behind the steps, then and only then can you really take it to the next level. You need to have a basic understanding of hypnotic language. It's why in the course I first taught all the hypnotic language. Now I'm going to do covert NLP with it. Right? I'll do several sessions on that. Some of the big NLP techniques like I'll do today. You really must understand hypnotic timing and pacing. Right? Because if you're doing split consciousness and they're doing kind of waking trance while you're doing the NLP technique, you have to understand hypnotic timing and pacing. You really have to have a signal recognition ability. You know, I think that's greatly misunderstood with people trying to do any kind of covert work, is you have to be able to understand what the person, how do you know, what's their signals that they're agreeing with you or disagreeing with you or following along. Do you have any signal recognition? Right? If you don't do that, then it's kind of a waste of time, you know? So you have to develop that. And there's a quick way to do it, right? And then you really have to understand story and metaphor, right? So let's talk really quickly about basic rapport for a quick review. Basically, you have to mirror and match, and that's to get comfort. I stress that in all my trainings. It's not about people liking you. It's about people feeling comfortable with you. And once you have that, it's easy to elicit your target or whoever you're working with, their VAK, their rep systems. It's also, once you have rapport, you can elicit their personal trance words, those words that bypass the critical factors of the mind. I'll give an example of that when I do a couple of demos. But if I know what your trance words are, then, and I'm not talking sleep, relax, I'm talking those words that light up your neurology, boom, I can begin to use this stuff in a different way. Then, you have to really understand meta programs, just enough so you understand, are the people moving toward or away from, right? And, you know, are they big picture or specific? Are they internal or external? That's the main three you have to know if you're going to do it this way, right, with covert NLP. You don't have to get lost in all these, you know, too intricate of details, right? And remember, rapport is always the key. Now, what is split consciousness if you've never played with it? Well, split consciousness is where you have people do two different things. And once you have a person split their consciousness, the side effect is trance. Billy Schilling, Captain Bill, our research scientist, he's also a research fellow at the Smithsonian Institute. He does, you know, retired Navy captain, why we call him Captain Billy, all this other stuff. He talks about, you know, the neurobiology of trance. And one of the things that happens when you have split consciousness, the side effect is a trance state. You may not be aware of it. You just think being relaxed or spaced out or totally focused. But if you really understand the intricacies of hypnosis, then you got them in a trance state. So here's a way to do it. All right. Now, and you have to leave where it says you leave. So especially, you got to imagine I'm right in front of you. You know, look at your hands as you look at your hands. Right? So look at your hands. Now look at me, but pay attention to your hands. That's right. Look at me, but put your conscious mind on your hands. And as you're looking at me and focusing on your hands, you notice maybe that one hand becomes slightly tingly. I'm not sure if it's the right or the left, but you begin to notice one hand becomes more tingly than the other. Isn't that interesting? Now, as you continue to look at me and focus on your hands, focus on the hand that's tingling as you focus on me. Isn't that interesting? Now, as you're looking at me and thinking about your hands, now you can look at your hands and listen to me. Or you can continue looking at me and thinking about your hands. Now, wiggle the fingers of that tingly hand. That's right. That's so cool, isn't it? Now, keep focused on that tingling in those fingers as you listen to me. Well, you know, if we were in a live situation where I had you in front of me, it would work on the phone. But what happens is you're paying attention to two different things. It causes you to go into a light trance state. You cannot not do it, right? So that's split consciousness. And what you're really doing when you're setting up a covert NLP technique is one of the easiest ways is to set up a split consciousness. And a lot of the NLP techniques in their basic structure cause split consciousness. You know, you're doing the phobia techniques. You're sitting in the movie theater, drift back as you look at yourself, look at the movie. Well, how the hell can you do that? Well, most people kind of just space off, which is what you're really going for. So a lot of the NLP techniques, a lot of them, and we'll be doing 2 today, the techniques themselves have some of that. Now, if you add a little bit conscious, bam, you got it, right? Now, advanced rapport. This is so cool, right? You got basic rapport where you mirror match, picking up the language, you're doing that, yada, yada. Great, great. Now, what's advanced rapport? Now, I started teaching this because what happens when I first teach people, rapport techniques, they go, oh, people are going to catch me. They're going to think I'm mimicking them, yada, yada, yada. And yet, the same people that in a seminar will argue with me that you can't do it this way, or the people that argue with me because they've taken incompetent NLP trainers who say you got to be very subtle. You can't really let people know you're doing it. You got to be so subtle, right? Well, these are the same people that argue with me that. And then I watch them at a conference and they run into a friend that they haven't seen since last year, and boom, they are mirroring and matching like clockwork. Hand movements, eye movements, the language picks up, the vocal patterns, da da da. And are they being subtle? No. Because in the real world, when you're in rapport, you are in rapport. Now again, if you do this with a stranger, they have no reference point of who you are. So when you start mirror matching a stranger, their brain is physically looking for, where do I store this person? You know, well, Will's just like my best friend Joe, therefore I'm going to put him near Joe. So that's that effect you have when you go, oh, it's like I've known you for 1,000 years. Great. So since that happens, what you have to do advanced rapport is as simple as you put yourself in state, right? And that basically aligns your energy. So you think about, the easiest way of putting yourself in that state is think about someone you know well and that you can read. You know when they're having a good day or bad day. Not a significant other, not a lover, if you will, but a really good friend. You can tell they're having a bad day, you really like them, and you can kind of read them, right? And now you imagine a bubble of energy surrounding both of you, right? And now you take that with you and put the person out, but that energy, that bubble around you of that aligned energy is there. And let's say you're going to talk to a new person or somebody you want to do something covert with, you put them in that energy bubble. So they're just like your buddy Joe. So basically, it's like old friends you haven't met yet, you know? You know, what's that song, the Bublé song, you know, I just haven't met you yet. So you feel that way. And again, if you really get into not just the energy stuff, but the stuff we're finding about the neurobiology, now your brains begin to really align. And it speeds up that first thing when I talked about reading skills. So you have a signal recognition, so you can tell if the person's following you, right? Then, to really have fun with this, you have to understand some basic hypnotic language. That's what I teach in the class, or what I've taught up to this point. You know, hypnotic language, personal trance words, analog marking, embedded commands, things like the more technique, because, and, but, all these kind of words that do different things in your mind, right? And you also have to have some pacing and timing. It's, you know, I have, of course, this is in my class, but it's in a lot of things that are out there, right? And again, going back to our signal recognition. So if you're in your state, then you can set up your target signal for yes, no, and are they relaxed and accessible, you know? So if you put that out there and you spend a few times getting to know the person, and obviously one of the things I see where people screw this up is they act like they could just walk up and in the first 30 seconds start in, you know, really doing something covert. Well, then that comes across as manipulative and condescending and just funny language. But if you spend some time getting in rapport, now I know your buzzwords, I know your trance words, right? I can set up like when you're relaxed, you know, tell me, think about a time you were very, I don't say relaxed, you know, what's it like when you're at home? You know, are you comfortable at work? And then you can kind of read the physiology. You know, where are you uncomfortable? And you read that physiology. That's basically the two I go for. I'm a simple guy, right? And so kind of a yes, no, and a relaxed and accessible, right? Then I spend a lot of time in my classes teaching story and metaphor. You have to understand the basis of a metaphor. Telling a stupid story that you don't have a goal for the story is not really creating a therapeutic metaphor. I am sick to my stomach of these people saying, I do Ericksonian. And they'll start telling the story and say, well, what's the goal here? Well, it's the story. I know it's a stupid story, but what is the goal? What are you doing with the story, right? Is there a methodology in the story that you understand? Because again, if you're in alignment with your target, that's what you're sending out energetically as well as with your words, right? And a story or metaphor is the easiest way to covertly use NLP, right? And if you put NLP in a story format, boom, it is easy to do. So it's fast, it's easy, it's not that hard, right? Now, metaphor creation, one of my favorite things. People see me train, I'm a storyteller. And people go, oh, were you always a storyteller? Not really. I learned how to do it. Anybody can learn how to do it. It's fun. It's fascinating, right? And when you do all these stories, you can really, really impact people at different levels, right? And metaphors and stories can lead people step by step into deeper states of consciousness. It's what movies do. It's what books do, right? And it can cause a heightened awareness, right? It doesn't have to be a relaxed. It can be heightened. Think of a horror movie. You know, when you're watching a horror movie, everything after that is scary. You know, and it doesn't have to make sense. People think too much, right? I still remember, I don't know how old I was, whenever the movie American Werewolf in London came out. I don't know why that movie did this, but boy, after I left that movie, I was freaking terrified at home, right? Every noise, I'm jumping around. I'm like, I knew it was a freaking movie. Maybe it accessed an old memory. Maybe I could have done a regression on it. Just the fact of the matter was, every damn thing was scary to me for the next day or two at night when it was dark, right? Of course, if you go see a comedy, things are funnier, right? Things make you laugh more, right? I do a lot of jokes and comedy, if you will, you know, when I'm teaching. Why? Well, I want people to laugh and have fun. And then if I do a few of those, then the whole training takes a lighter feeling, right? If you watch a romantic movie, right, it sets a romantic mood. You know, this is why I was talking to one of my nephews. We're talking about this girl he wanted to date. I said, well, you know, find out what kind of movie she wants to go to, some kind of, you know, chick flick, take her to that. Oh, man, I don't want to take her to a chick flick. You know, maybe go see, like, you know, when Spider-Man comes out. I'm like, dude, first of all, Spider-Man has a romantic aspect, right? But, dude, if you want the reward, you got to play the game, right? The movie puts the girl in a romantic mood, right? It's much easier, right? And it's fun, right? So this is what happens, right? In inspirational movies like Rocky, you know, don't mess with me. I just watched Rocky, right? Rudy, you know, it gets you ready to take on the world, right? And of course, you can set up obstacle removing. You know, there's an obstacle in your life. That's what a lot of the stories are. It's the conflict. You know, how do you overcome this obstacle? You just have to basically pay attention to it. Think back to the movies you really like, and if you go back and kind of don't get caught up in the movie, watch the process of the movie, then you go, oh, I get it. Look at like Star Wars, one of my favorites, the one I talk about, right? Well, it's good versus evil. It's innocence versus being kind of cynical, or not cynical, what's the word I want? You're already down the dark side versus the innocence, working and teamwork. It's got a lot of, thing, and the obstacle is, bringing things back together, yada, yada, yada. So if you understand that, then you can really have fun with this, right? Now, so if you have a little bit of knowledge of that, if not, review it. Those are in the class, I constantly review this, right? The NLP techniques, right? Now you want to do an NLP technique covertly, right? First of all, you have to understand the technique you want to use covertly. You have to really understand it. You have to understand the structure and the process, right? Not just the steps, but why are the steps where they are, right? And the process. I just tell people, if you do it enough, just in step-by-step format, then you understand it. Then you also begin to understand the intention of each step, right? Because again, if you're in advanced rapport and your energy's out there and mingling, your intention, as Ormond McGill says, comes through, right? And then, okay, so now I understand the structure and process. What's the intention of this technique? Then you break it into small chunk sizes. And if you're really going to get elegant with it, you can just do it that way, just describe the technique. Or you can use the structure to help you design a metaphor or a story, right? Take a classic story, kind of tweak it up, boom, you can pop an NLP technique in there. So let me give you an example. Let's use the visual squash. What is the visual squash? Well, it's a parts or polarity response. Part of you wants to do this, part of you wants to do that, right? Well, if you have a conscious-subconscious conflict, right, which happens, that's the part of you that wants to quit smoking versus the part of you that keeps you smoking. Well, the conscious part is probably the part that wants to do it because of your health, your vitality, you're this, you're this, you're this. But the part that's sabotaging it, the subconscious part, could be anything. You're an individual, you're a Marlboro man, you're whatever it is, right? Nobody's going to tell me what to do. People constantly say that, right? Hey, part of me wants to do whatever it is, but part of me fights it. Can you help me? Right? And they'll actually take their hands and go, part of me, great. Right? And it has to do with limiting beliefs, old beliefs, right? And if you do this, now you understand that, boom, now we can begin to reframe it. Now the visual squash, just step by step, take a deep breath, close your eyes, imagine the part of you, and elicit the intentions of each part. Yeah, that alone, you're doing split consciousness because you have them tracking several different things. People will go into a light trance just doing that, right? But now if you break out the parts in a story or metaphor form, and then you have some kind of conflict. It could be drama, it could be comedy, right? A lot of my jokes are basically metaphors, right? Have characters be relatable, both good and evil, right? And that's about rapport. And, I've always heard it said in movies and plays, books even. The movie is only going to be as good as the bad guy is believable and somehow attractive, right? Like it has something. It pulls you toward it, right? The other night, there was nothing on and I was flipping through the station and Die Hard was on, right? And the movie that kind of redesigned action films, right? And, they teach that in a lot of film schools. Or they did because it changed the genre of action movies. The hero was flawed. The Bruce Willis part, he was flawed. He was human. He wasn't superhuman. The bloody feet, all that was actually, when you think back to it, brilliant. Because a lot of the action movies, the superheroes can do things that, he does some amazing things, but he's human and he cares about his wife. All that goes, anyway. But the bad guy in it, right, the terrorist, is charming, right? And so you got a good bad guy, it makes the story go better. Darth Vader, is there's something, well, there's a lot of things there. But think about that. The good movies, the bad guy has something. Think of Silence of the Lambs, You know, there's something about that, right? So it has to be relatable, if you will, right? Now, so you have that. So, and then you're going to do a belief reframe or change histories built into the story, right? And you can use hypnotic words in your storytelling, right? Now, you have to have a clear outcome in your mind of what you want to do. And again, when you're right in front of the person, you can add physical movements. Your hand, you know, part of, you'll see. You'll imagine it when I go, right? So, once upon a time, and this just happened a few weeks ago while I was up north, right? The presenting problem, or someone, it was a student, he wanted to study more and be more focused, but something stops him. He goes, you know, part of his actual setup was, part of me really wants to do this. I know, you know, he's finishing his junior year, he's an okay student, but he doesn't know what he wants to do, but he needs to study more, get good grades, especially his senior year, for whatever he wants to do. Go to trade school, go to college, whatever. Go in the military, right? I say, okay, right? So he's already set up for a visual squash. So I spent some time talking to him. And he was a toward person, right? Internally motivated. A visual with a strong kinesthetic. He had some auditory, but he was visual with a strong kinesthetic. And I elicited the part of him that stops him, you know, that doesn't want him to study too much and you know, be too focused in school, is he had fear of being a nerd. You know, he wanted to be a cool kid, right? So that's the setup, right? Great. That you know, imagine I'm talking to him, you know, we'll call him Joe. You know, Joe, that reminds me of a story. And it's a story of two people, two types of people, in fact. Now, I'm not sure if you can just relax and listen to this and just think about, you know, the part of you that really wants to study more and be more focused because, you know, you're 17, you're going into your senior year next year, and, you know, you got to finish up your junior year, and it's up to you. But the part of you wants to really, you know, excel. And then a part of you, you know, you want to be laid back, you want to be the cool guy, you know, and all that. I understand that, right? But that reminds me of this story for some reason. And it was a story of two people. And one of the types of people, they like to study and work hard and do all this stuff, right? They got up early in the morning. They went to bed early in the, you know, early at night so they could get up with fresh eyes and work hard and be energetic. And we kind of call them the achievers, if you will. But they were doing what they do, right? Now they lived in the valley, and so we call them the achievers, or the valley people. And you know, like I said, they were very conscientious, right? And they did all these things. So they were successful, and they did all those wonderful things. But now, what's interesting, in the hills surrounding it, there were these people who liked to play and be cool and hang out. They were spontaneous. We'll call those the hill people or the naturals, right? And so, of course, they had more fun, but they didn't get a lot done. You know, houses were half finished, projects were half done because they'd get caught up in doing something else, you know, but they had a lot of fun. Now, what's interesting, the naturals or the hill people never really talked to the achievers, you know, the people in the valley. Because, first of all, you know, the naturals were up late at night. They wanted to sleep in. They didn't want to do things. You know, they each were following their own drummer, if you will. So there was a conflict, but they never really met to talk it out. Now, right in the valley, in the space between the valley and the hills, there was a bridge. And underneath this bridge, there lived a troll. Now, the troll was the only people who knew the people that lived in the valley, you know, and we call those the achievers again, right? The conscientious group. And he knew how hard they worked, and it was wonderful to see them achieve their goals and do all this, right? But he also knew that they sometimes didn't have a lot of fun, and, you know, didn't be as spontaneous and be in the moment and all that. And yet he also knew the naturals, right, or the hill people. And he saw how much fun they had and how much they enjoyed things and could get lost in the moment. But they didn't achieve a lot. So he saw that both sides really had something to offer. You know, and if they could come together and work as a group, just think about the wonderful things they could do. You know, they could be spontaneous and have fun. And yet, no, there were times they had to crack down and be focused and energized and work towards their goals. And so they could have the best of both worlds if they would only work together. But to do this, they had to be willing to talk. And they never seemed to talk. And then what happened one evening, maybe as the sun was setting, or some people would say, you know, the dusk was rising, the troll went out on the bridge and let out a forlorn cry. And of course, the naturals up in the hills who were just getting up because they'd been, getting ready to go out and do things, were concerned. So they came down to see how their buddy the troll was doing. Well, and the conscientious achievers were just getting ready for bed, but they too were worried. So they came down to the bridge to see the troll. And there, for the very first time, just like you sitting in the chair thinking about the parts of you that wants to do this, there they were for the first time. And the troll explained that neither one had to give up anything. You could be spontaneous and have fun and do all this, and yet you could be an achiever and conscientious if you chose to be. And in fact, if you worked together and knew there were times to be spontaneous and have fun and do all those things, and yet there were times to be focused and energized and work toward those goals, it would be wonderful. And if the two people would just come together, they could accomplish so much more as a group. And so for the very first time in all the years, they reached out and they began to touch. And they found out they had a lot in common. At the highest level, they both wanted the same thing, to enjoy life, to be successful. And so they began to blend and merge in ways that surprised and delighted even the troll. Because they began to work together. And they could be spontaneous and have fun, and yet they could crack down and be conscientious and work hard. And so then they built all the things that they wanted. They achieved goals beyond their wildest dreams. Now, Joe, that's just a story. But if you really think about it, these two things can begin to happen to you as only is appropriate for you now. Good. Great. Now that's just a story. I actually did that, right, with someone, because we weren't in a position to actually do a formal session when I did that. So it's a visual squash, right? I broke it down, his fear of being a nerd, and yet the part of him that wanted to succeed, put it in a story form, right? Now, and of course, then I'm just the weird guy that tells stories. All right. Now, I'm related to the person, so now I'm the weird uncle that tells stories. But, seemed to work, right? Now, let me do another one. Let's break down the new behavior generator. Let's break down the new behavior generator, right? And of course, we know that the new behavior generator is to create a new behavior. And for this to happen, you need a role model who has the skill that you want, whatever it is, right? And you don't have to know the person personally. In fact, I always teach it's better if you don't know the person personally. If you want to be a better public speaker, you got Tony Robbins, Deepak Chopra, Oprah Winfrey, I don't care. But you know that they have the skill that you want. Athlete, this technique, when I first saw it in NLP, I'm like, wow, this is just like theater of the mind from Maxwell Maltz. And he actually got it from studying athletes, because all athletes seem to do this naturally, right? So, but you need a role model that has the skill that you want. Great. Then you have to understand trans-identification, right? That if the person steps into it mentally, some things are going to shift in that person's physiology, right? And then you need to have the ability to kind of paste the story to add the physical skills that person wants to have. And I forgot to add not just the physical skills, but the mental strategies and thought patterns that would help that person achieve that goal. All right? And then what most people forget when they're doing a visual squash is, or not a visual, excuse me, new behavior generators, they, see the movie of the person doing it. We'll go, the steps are, imagine your model, see your model. Let's say it's a baseball player, want to hit better. See your model, come to the batter's box, do all this, and then see the movie of them doing it. That's the very first level people would teach, right? Well, if you're a little bit slicker, that you'd say, see your model come up to the batter's box, do that. But you know what you really see? You see their thoughts and their energy. You see their focus. You see what they're thinking, how to relax, how to focus their breathing, all the things that they're doing, right? And you would add some of the mental strategies if you knew what they were, right? Great. So now you're adding not just the physical, the way they hold the bat, the way they swing, but some of the mental processes. Because, to truly master a skill, you have to not just know the mental the physical skill, you have to know the mental processes behind the skill. How do they think? How does a good batter think? Right? Great. Right? And then, so you have that. Now, the thing most people forget, or they don't know, because very few people teach this, is, okay, so you have the person, you see them doing the model, right? The model doing the behavior. Let's use, again, baseball player. So the baseball player comes up in the batter's box. You see them, tap the bat, do all the things that they do. But now you also see their energy, how it shifts, how they're more focused. Their vision opens up. They become, they can notice their pupils dilate, right? So they can take in more of the ball. They can, their brain speeds up so they can do the trajectory of that baseball coming at them at 90 miles an hour. So you're just basically setting it up, right? And then the thought pattern, how they're out, they know what the pitch is coming, yada, yada, yada. And then they think back of all the times they've hit baseballs in the past. So now they're in that circle of excellence as they get ready to go into the batter's box. Great, great. So now you've done that. That's good. That's good. In fact, better than 90%. But if you add that, okay, and as you're watching your model do this again, getting ready to bat or batting and hitting the ball, you also see it's almost like part of the movie's translucent. You can see through it. And you see that this person goes to the batting cage. They practice batting, right? They have a batting coach. They get instruction. They work on it. They do strength and conditioning drills, right? Maybe they're doing those exercises to make their wrists and their forearms stronger. Yada, yada, yada. So not just the skill, but the homework to get them that good, right? I know I always tell the story when I was working with a golfer once, and a person wanted to model Tiger Woods about golf. And back when Tiger was dominating everything, of course, he's still one of the world's best, but at the time he was just totally, totally dominating everything. And I said, okay, well, first of all, we can't, what do you call it? Replicate the start golf at 8 years old or 4 years old, whatever it was. But I'd happen to read his routine, right? And how he thinks, how he spends time talking to other golfers and doing that. So when we're doing the visual exercise, right? Or I'm laying it out, I go, okay, so how he's holding the club. Oh, this guy had studied that. But now think of the thought patterns, how he's relaxed and focused, how he's just totally on this hole. There's no hole after it. There's no hole before it. There's only the shot in front of him, right? So we're installing some of the mental. And I said, then you look through the movie, and now you see, what Tiger Woods does? He gets up early and he runs 3 to 5 miles, right? I mean, he physically runs, not a light jog, right? Then he lifts weights, and he has that strength and conditioning coach. Then he does yoga, or whatever, I think it was yoga, stretches and all this, right? Then he has a nutritious light breakfast, and then that's before he goes to work in the morning, right? And then he hits, I think it was several hundred golf balls, like drives, right? Then he goes to work, does whatever he does for a living, besides golf. Then that afternoon, of course, he plays a round of golf with his golf pro, who's coaching him and doing this. And then he finishes, with a couple hundred putts, right? Of course, the guy goes, well, I can't do all that. As well, he can't play golf like Tiger Woods. But what can you do that he does? Can you work out better, right? Because Tiger Woods is an athlete. He's not just a golfer, he's an athlete. Add the mental skills, and the guy's golf game improved. He started exercising, got a strength coach. I said, if you're serious, you're going to do what this guy did. To the ability that you can. Great. So now that we know that, right? So here's an example, right? So again, so you have all this wonderful stuff that you're doing, right? Now, oops, skip that. Okay. Now, I had a client once who wanted to improve his speaking skills, right? And in fact, when I went to work with him, he had already seen me for some other things. In fact, I forget where this happened, but it wasn't in a traditional setting, But he said, I'm going to make an appointment to come see you, Doc. I said, great, for what? I think if I remember right, he stopped smoking with me. And I'm like, great. I think it was in Port Charlotte, right? I still remember that. And I think at a restaurant or something. And I go, okay, let's make that appointment. And I go call my office. Says, what is it? He goes, I want to be a better speaker, right? I said, well, what? You know, and whatever he was doing, now he had to start giving speeches. I said, well, do you know any good speakers? And he goes, well, I went to a Tony Robbins seminar a couple of years ago. He's the highest paid professional speaker in the world. Would you like to speak like Tony Robbins? He said, yeah. And so we talked a little bit, and I said, well, you know, that reminds me of another client who is a lot like you. And I know that you, like me, understand that you have to develop these skills. And I had that client once, and he wanted to be a better speaker just like you do. And he went and he studied Tony Robbins and some of the others. So what he would do is he would sit there and at night he would imagine Tony Robbins giving a speech. And he'd see him not just lumber to the stage or casually walk up, bounce up on the stage. It's his stage. He's claiming that stage. That's his space, right? And then he's greeting the audience. He's upbeat. He's motivated, right? His energy's up. You can kind of, even if you're not into energy, you just know that his energy's up. He's thinking how much he's going to help this group, how much he's going to help them make their changes in their lives, right? That he's doing all this wonderful thing. He's looking at the group and he's making connections with people. He's doing all this as he's getting up there and he's just starting, right? And his energy's up and he's focused and he's energized and he knows what he's going to talk about thoroughly. I mean, he has prepped, he has rehearsed the talk. And then, and imagine watching that movie. This is what my client did. He did this every day, once or twice a day. And then he even started thinking about, as he's watching that movie of Tony Robbins, give that talk, he knew that Tony Robbins practiced more. He had a personal coach to help him with his speaking. He uses movie directors or film directors, lives in Hollywood, right? Or did. So he's out there working with that. He took voice lessons and movement lessons. He takes karate, works out to stay in shape so he presents well. I mean, he's doing all this thing to be a better speaker. He really studies NLP and hypnosis. He doesn't call that anymore. So he can really get his message across. Because on an aside, this guy had started looking at some of that stuff. My client did. So I said, that's kind of great. So, and then what my client would do is he would imagine, if you could do this now, just imagine this. It's almost like he cut Tony Robbins' picture out and he'd see himself up there. But Tony Robbins, who wants to help people, left his energy and his aura and his thoughts and his energy and his focus. And so he put his own picture up there, absorbing everything Tony Robbins did, bounding on the stage, feeling energetic, connecting with the people, knowing, oh my God, I'm going to help you make so many changes. I'm going to do this for you, right? And then he thought, as he watched that movie of Tony, that used to be Tony Robbins, now it's him. It's like he's blended with Tony. He is that. It's like he knows he's already done some of the homework. He stopped smoking. He's lost weight. He's working out. Now he just needs to maybe study some more language and some more presentation skills, hire a personal coach, do all that. Then, boy, he's going to be so good, right? Now, so I know you got a speech. He told me he had a quick talk he had to give like the next day, and I couldn't see him till the next week. So I said, just keep thinking about that when you give your speech tomorrow to the Rotary, I think it was, and then when you come in next week, we're going to really work on this, right? He comes in next week. That's the story. Broke it down, not in a story form. I just laid it out like I had a client once doing like a quote, right? And I didn't even do all that fancy language patterns while I was doing this, right? So it's fun. I'm having a blast with this. And this guy comes in, he goes, man, the speech went great. I can't wait to do more. It's great. I said, here's what we need to do. And he was already set. I said, you really need to take the NLP course, And he goes, yeah, I really do. So he bought my home study course, right? I did a couple more sessions, right? I had him go read books. I mean, it was wonderful, right? And that's kind of doing it. And he didn't know what the technique was. He didn't need to know what the technique was. I just did it. We're sitting there at, I think, a restaurant or something. I think it was Panera Bread in Port Charlotte. And so, boom, I walked him through it. It helped him. He came in to see me later. We did the session. I sold him a bunch of stuff. Everybody's happy, right? Now, you have to remember, covert NLP. Nature is easy to manipulate, if you will, right? And NLP, by its nature, is covert hypnosis. When you have people close their eyes and see a movie, it's association, disassociation. That if you just did the steps of see the movie, now step in, step out, see the movie. If you did that a couple times where you're associating, disassociating, it's causing that split consciousness. It's doing all this, right? So by its nature, the visual squash is the polarity response. It makes people pull back and see the parts of themselves. 6-step reframe is, back up and see different alternatives to the behavior you want to change. All these wonderful techniques are covert hypnosis by its nature. You're already doing it if you understand NLP. If you keep it simple, it makes it even more. Don't overcomplicate it, right? You know, you need to really understand the process of NLP and its techniques. You know, break it down, look at it, do this. Kind of like what we did here, right? And again, regular NLP techniques are covert hypnosis, right? Now with covert hypnosis, right, when you add that, the language patterns, which I didn't do that much. Well, yes, I did. I put a lot in there, right? As you look forward, look back, do all this stuff, it becomes magic in action because it bypasses all the critical factors of the mind. It helps people reframe beliefs, right? And it's done while the person assumes no trance, which actually increases the power of the technique. Their guard isn't up because they're not like, whoa, you know, he's just telling me a story or he's just telling me about a client that he did, right? So let me tell you this, right? I still have my conversational hypnosis and NLP class. This, I think, is module 7 or 8, right? If you go read the sales letter, it says there's 4 modules. I'm already up to 7 or 8. I know there's going to be a couple more because I'm going to break down more NLP techniques and put them in there. This module, which you're listening to, will be inside this. This is my teaser, right? And because the next modules in this class will break down covert NLP, like we're doing today, right? And it helps you become a master of conversational or covert NLP and hypnosis. And you learn the true secrets to covert hypnosis, you know? And it's basically the understanding of secret mind control, right? And, you know, I've had this course for a while. I've been teaching it for couple months now, right? Breaking it down into modules. It's on a membership site, so you can access the material 24/7 as long as you got internet access, and you can play it. I think you can even download it. You can play it, watch it, review it, play it, watch it, review it, right? And that's at www.secretmindcontrol.com. That's the sales letter. And the special price is $197 till May 1st, right? Then I'm probably going to raise it back up. Now, when you click on it, it looks like it's still $397, but when you click on it, it takes you to the PayPal button, which is only going to be $197, right? So that's for people that are in this call, right? Or that really want to learn it. Now, why should people take this class? Well, without it, you really don't have a deep understanding of conversational hypnosis or even traditional hypnosis. You know, you have no ability to do things on the fly and bypass people's critical resistance. Of course, you'll make less income because you have less lost sales, right? And if you're a speaker or a trainer, anything like that, you're going to have less impact as that speaker or trainer. Now, with this course, you have greater understanding of hypnosis and NLP, the ability to improvise, do things on the fly, a better speaking skill, right? And when you're doing things on the fly, I want to go back to improvise, because then you can do some of these techniques, you know, like when you're in public and you can't set up and really do a technique, but you know you can help somebody. Because again, I always say the true magic of what we do is helping people make these changes covertly, right? Of course, you're going to have better speaking skills. You'll probably have more sales because you'll be better at it. You'll have more impact, right? Now, and this is what I want you to have. Again, it's my spring super special. It's valued at over $2,000 if I was selling it by the module. Usually it's $397, right? For the next week, give or take, it's going to be $197, so you save another $200. And again, you go to www.secretmindcontrol.com, and if you're not already in it, and I'm going to be adding more modules as we go along. And that reminds me of another story. A few weeks ago, I had the pleasure, and it is a true pleasure to get to do what I do. You know, not just teach people NLP and hypnosis. You know, a lot of you know I have hobbies and this and that. Started taking acting classes again, which is wonderful. And I'm still dabbling in the martial arts. Well, a few weeks ago, I had the wonderful opportunity to be on a panel of students taking their black belt exam. And it was a friend of mine. It was his students. It was Master John. And Taekwondo, which isn't my main skill, but he's one of those unique trainers. I'm not sure if you know a true master trainer. He has no problem with bringing in other styles, other people that have different skill sets. It's not all just about him and his skill set. He likes bringing other people in. And on this panel, I mean, of course, I was there, and I do what they call Shotokan or Reiku Kempo. Reiku Kempo is the pressure point karate, and I come in and taught his students some of the pressure point stuff. Another guy there was a kung fu guy, and he was teaching kung fu. One of the guys there, which is the big thing now, of course, is ground fighting. MMA stuff, UFC stuff. So they were talking about ground fighting and doing some of that. So this guy was really comfortable enough to talk about other trainers, bringing other people in, exposing his students to other things. Because, if they wanted to leave, like he says, go study other stuff. Doesn't mean you won't come back, right? In fact, the other stuff only makes your art stronger. And so that's one reason I have such a good rapport with John and Derek, who's another Taekwondo master. In fact, he's a world champion. Another guy was there. I love training with him. He's a kickboxer. Last time I took a seminar with him, I couldn't walk for 2 days. He came over from the other coast of Florida to do it. As I said, the kung fu guy was there, and a couple ground fighting guys, and a couple of traditional karate guys. So he had a big panel, which makes his students, the 3 guys testing for black belt, they were intimidated and terrified, right? Even though they knew us, why do people get scared right before they have to do something in front of people they know? I don't know why that is, right? But it was fun, and it was wonderful for me because I remember when these guys started taking classes. In fact, it was kind of interesting because all these guys are also police officers in different jurisdictions, if you will. And so, I saw them come in, and, as police officers, they battle the thing about using strength, and as men, I'm just going to muscle my way through this technique. Well, the thing about martial arts, strength is good, but there are times where strength is your enemy. It is actually your enemy, right? Sun Tzu would say, strength, resistance meets resistance. Sometimes you just have to go soft, right? And so these guys had to learn how to just be relaxed and do that, quit muscling everything. So anyway, a couple of guys, I've seen train, and I've trained with off and on over the couple of years. I've been studying about 4 years to get to this level. And so I hadn't seen them for a while. I've been busy and not training with them. So I got to see their growth. And sometimes you have to step back. And then when you step in, you really see someone's growth. Same with my friend John and Derek and Gustavo. I forget how good they are because I'm not training with them like I used to. And I'm like, damn, these guys are good. We went to spar. I'm like, oh my God, I'm glad I didn't have to spar these guys, right? I forget they're good at what they do, right? I'm not sure if you can just imagine listening to someone who's just good at what they do. And they really try to share that with their students, And so anyway, I'm there, and we do this wonderful test and have a great time. Well, it was at the guy named Derek's school. And since it's at his school, he kind of led it, which again, he had no problem bringing in, these other people, which was kind of fun, right? And so we're at the end of the test, we did a candle ceremony. Martial arts has a lot of ceremonies. It's based in rituals. Everybody loves rituals. The bowing in, the bowing out. And, I still do that whenever I walk into a dojo. I bow to the flags and bow to wherever the master is. When I shake someone's hands there in Taekwondo, there's a certain way you do their handshake. If it's traditional karate, you just do the little bow. Domo arigato. Whatever it is, right? There's all these rituals, right? Well, he does a ritual, and I thought it was beautiful, and it reminds me of what I'm doing. And sometimes when you see a ritual that's not quite yours, but it can relate to what you do, you really begin to see the power of it. And Derek, he gave each master a little candle, and we lit our candle, and we assumed I can't sit cross-legged the way they do, but I sat on the floor and had my candle in front of me. And then each one of the initiates had their candle. And we had our candle in front of us. Ours were lit. His was not. Or the initiates were not lit. And then what would happen is Derek told a story. And as you all know, I love stories. And this is the story. As we're sitting there cross-legged in this, and he turned the lights down, closed his drapes. So it was daytime on Sunday. But it was comfortable and warm. Of course, it's Florida, so beautiful weather. And we're comfortable as we're sitting there. And you could either look at the candle. If you could imagine looking at a candle now, right, as he told this story and walked around the room. Or you could focus on the initiates and listen to the story. But whatever it was, he told the story of his master when his first master came from Korea. And when his master came from Korea, his master gave him 2 things to bring with him to this country, besides his knowledge. He gave him a candle and a bar of soap. and in a package. And the master didn't know what it was till he got here, because his master instructed him not to open it till he got to America and was getting ready to start his classes. And it also reminds me, as Derek said, that, you got to look at people who claim to be masters, who have no master themselves. So who's your master's master? In the martial arts, I'd consider, depending on the skill, Derek and John and Gustavo and, of course, George Dillman. The other masters I had when I first started traditional Japanese karate have made their transition to the next level. And, of course, the NLP and the hypnosis world, I have masters I work with. Currently, I have people I would consider my masters in different disciples. So I'm always worried about masters that don't have masters and won't share their masters with their disciples. But anyway, he was telling the story. And so his master got to this country and got ready to teach his first class and opened up the box. And in the box was a candle and the bar of soap. And he thought, this is weird, right? His master had trained him for 10 years in the skill of Taekwondo and fighting. And now he's here in this new country getting ready to teach his students. And the only thing his master gave him was the bar of soap and the candle and a note. And what the note said is, he goes, son, because when you truly master somebody, they're almost like your children. Son, I've taught you all that I could possibly teach you at this point. In fact, in many ways, you've probably excelled me. And I hope you keep growing and excel far beyond what I did. But I ask that you take these two things and carry them with you into your training. And he goes, you notice a bar of soap. And the bar of soap isn't to keep yourself physically clean. Of course, that's very important as martial artists. When we sweat, and we can, become a little bit offensive. So keep yourself clean. But also think about keeping yourself spiritually clean. Because you can get caught up in money and awards and vanity. So keep yourself clean. And that soap is to remind you to keep yourself clean. And so the master thought about what his master said and thought, that's true. He's seen other people start and get the skills and become, get caught up in opening bigger dojos or becoming world champs just to say they're a world champ. And they lost the art. What's the essence of the martial art? Which is self-development, mastering yourself. A true master never fights. You never have to. It doesn't get to that point, right? But it's the mastering the physical body. And so he put this soap on a shelf. And then he looked at the candle and he continued reading the note. And the note said, and son, I give you a candle because I've been burning my candle for years, but it's one candle in the darkness. And I try to give all my students their own candles so they can light their candle. And just think, if 1,000 candles are together, it's 1,000 times more light than that one candle. And now you're in a new country and you can take this candle and spread your light. And of course, it'll be slightly different from my light because you're adding your new things. But soon, my candle will go out. I'll make my transition to the next level. I may just retire. Whatever it is. I need you to take your candle. And don't hoard this information. Again, use the soap to keep yourself spiritually clean. And then light your candle and light your students' candles so they can take this knowledge into the world. And as he told the story, people were weeping from the martial arts standpoint. And I had tears in my eyes because I thought, I'm lighting other people's candles. It's one of the greatest joys that I do. And then soon my candle will change. We're all going to make a transition to the next level. I may make a transition in what I do for a living. I'm not sure how much longer I'll be lighting these candles in NLP and hypnosis. I love it, but I love many other things. Because you hear me talk about passions. And I have a passion for the martial arts. I have a passion for my acting. I have a passion for NLP and hypnosis. And so I ask that you take your passions and channel them into what you do. And take this skill set that I'm trying to teach and light your candle. So maybe I can put my candle on a shelf. And then Derek said to his master, when you still walk into his dojo, there's a candle and a soap bar on a shelf behind a little oriental glass case. And whenever he has a black belt, he gives them a candle and they light it. And as the initiates came forward and lit their candle, then came and shook each one of our hands, I was just blessed to be there and watch these guys grow as martial artists. And again, as police officers, they protect and serve us here in the wonderful state of Florida. And, you know, I thought, man, they're really going out of their way. You know, they're martial artists and they're police officers. And you're listening to this and you're NLPers and hypnotists and other change agents. So I ask that you take this skill and light your candle. And don't hide your light. As one master said, don't hide your light under a bushel. Let it shine out into the world. Because we have skills that can help people. Like the student that wanted to study more and be more focused. And I also threw some things in there that don't aim low. Think big. Most people live lives of quiet desperation and are afraid to dream big. He had small dreams. Because he's in a limited mindset right now. And so I didn't add that in when I taught, but I had to open up. There's things you could do. There's places you could go. You don't have to do what everyone thinks that you should do. And think about us with our skill sets. As we look to the future, we realize it's unlimited. Based on our past, we're learning these skills. Very few people get to learn them. And of course, the public speaker, he had the skill set he wanted to improve. And so we can do this covertly, on the fly. Or of course, we can do it in our office. So I ask that you take this skill set and really have some fun with it. And do the things that are necessary to really, really achieve your goals. Because it's been a pleasure of my life helping people make these changes. That's right. And I'd like to thank you all for being a part of this. And take your candle. If it's not already lit, light it. But please don't burn it at both ends. When you burn your candle at both ends and you don't have an off switch, that's why people leave. I've been teaching a lot lately that you have to have an off switch as an helper and a hypnotist. But I ask that you do that and take these skills out into the world. And find masters to help you. Of course, I would be privileged to continue to do so to some of you. And some of you I may not know as you listen to this. But I'd like to thank you for being a part of my life up to this time. And have a wonderful day, a great weekend. Of course, I'm here in the beautiful state of Florida. It's going to be 80 degrees and sunny. So for the rest of you, you can hate me right now while it's wintertime if you're listening up north. But again, thank you and God bless.